And that is why I will be honored when I walk into that courtroom on October 2nd. Well, my role is civil. But I will come back before you soon with a check for $250 million.
You stupid. What's going on, everybody? Thank you all for joining me today. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel, and most importantly, please make sure that you are following me on Telegram at TD Media Group to help circumvent social media censorship and shadow banning. And with the introduction out of the way, let's get into today's news. And today we have to head on over to New York City, aka New Venezuela. Why is that? Because I want to talk about someone that I haven't spoke on in a while. We have to talk about Letitia James, aka Big Tish, also known as Big Tush, the notorious P.I.G. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to talk about her today. That was mean. I'm sorry. I didn't the notorious P.I.G. that went a little bit too far for my liking. All right, that went a little bit too far. After it came out, I was like, nah. I probably shouldn't have said all that, but anyways, we're talking about Big Tush. Okay, we'll keep it there. I typically call her Big Tush. We'll strike the notorious P.I.G. from the record, because Big Tush, man, she took a massive L today. Okay, let's regroup. Let's get myself together. She took a huge L today in the courts. As you can see here, Trump massive $500 million civil fraud fine in AG Tish James's case thrown out by New York appeals court. Yes, that massive $500 million fine was thrown in the trash by the appeals court. And despite that, Big Tush is still trying to pretend that this was some sort of a victory, and we'll get into that in a moment. But before we even dive into all that, what I want to do first is that I want to play this quick video here from Peter Navarro, which is Donald Trump's top trade advisor. I want to take a moment to listen to what he had to say concerning the $500 million fine being struck down by the appeals court. I thought it was very interesting, and it is relevant to the conversation. So I want to play that for you guys next.
You got anybody on this?
Lawfare, today, yes, sir. New York appeals court has thrown out President Trump's $500 million New York civil fraud penalty. That was prosecuted by Letitia James last year.
Yeah.
The appeals court says it was, quote, excessive. What is your reaction?
Yeah. Letitia James is another one that belongs in jail. Look, the Democrats, they really overplayed their hand on this because they thought they could take Donald Trump out. They didn't. And in the process, they totally destroyed American people's faith in our Justice Department. And they got him got President Trump a lot of votes because of that. I mean, the book I wrote about it, I went to prison so you won't have to. The whole theme of that thing is that I'm the wake-up call. If they can come for me, they can come for you. So people need to understand that these are bad people. Letitia James, Fani Willis in Georgia, Alvin Bragg in Manhattan. The question is, how coordinated were they? And that's a question that needs to be answered by an investigation.
That's a very good question. And one thing that I found very interesting throughout the time that Trump's been in office so far, Alvin Bragg has been really flying under the radar lately. Been really flying under the radar, and I feel like there could possibly be something in the works for him in the future as far as an investigation is concerned. I'm kind of surprised that there hasn't been anything quite yet. But also too, he's been remaining very low profile since Trump won, which is probably a good thing. You really don't want to be out here speaking. A lot of these folks like Big Tush were out here pumping up their chests and pounding on their chest when Trump won, talking real big. And she's still talking big, but Alvin Bragg said, you know what? I'm just gonna, duck down over here, and pretend like, none of this stuff pre-election as far as the lawfare is concerned ever happened, right? So now the focus has been, for the most part, a good deal of it mainly on Big Tush, especially concerning, all the mortgage fraud allegations, which is pretty much open and shut as far as I'm concerned. But I don't want to stray too far off topic. Let's get back over here, right? Because I want to talk about the massive L that Big Tush just took. So once again, The $500 million fine has been thrown out. Allow me a moment to scroll down and read a little bit of this article here. Then I want to pivot to a CNN clip very quickly, because I thought that what their legal analysis was saying in that clip was very interesting and worth listening to also. But first, let's dive into this article. President Trump won a huge victory today, when a New York appeals court threw out the massive, more than $500 million fine he owed Attorney General Letitia James's business fraud case. The appellate division, First Department, overturned the whopping $464 million judgment that Trump 78 faced after he was found to have fraudulently inflated his net worth by billions of dollars over a decade to get better loan insurance terms. Much of the case brought by the New York Attorney General Letitia James against Trump, however, still remains in place and will now go to New York's highest court as the legal battle between the state's top lawyer and the commander-in-chief continues. She's going to regret pursuing this, mark my words. The 323-page decision included 3 separate opinions, but all agreed the fine against Trump, which had grown to $515 million, including interest, was excessive, right? They agreed that it was excessive. And $515 million, that is egregiously excessive, right? And before I carry on, really let this settle in for a moment. Because, as time passes and with the 24-hour news cycle and everything gets old, all news that comes out gets old within the first 15 minutes of hearing it, right? It's old news. You don't want to hear it anymore. You have to take a moment to really go back in time and think about all of the lawfare that was waged on Trump pre-election and how egregious that was. We're talking about the Democrat Party was engaging in third world politics. They literally tried to bankrupt this man and throw him in jail, essentially for the rest of his life, just because they didn't want to run against him in an honest and fair election. Okay? Let that settle in when you really process how evil these DNC lunatics actually are. Thursday's decision was a blow to James, whose office prosecuted Trump, and to Engoron. I believe I'm pronouncing his last name right. His first name is Arthur Engoron, as at least one of the appellate judges found Engoron made errors in his rulings on the case. Who is Engoron? If I'm pronouncing his name correctly, this is him here. Arthur Engoron. This man is a Manhattan Supreme Court justice. Understand, when in the appellate court they said, they found out that there was an error made. I believe that they say 2 errors made. Well, he made errors, plural, right? In his ruling on the case. Understand, those weren't errors. This is a Supreme Court justice who was playing partisan politics with a man's life and finances, all in the name of party loyalty. I don't ever want to hear anybody speak about the Democrats as if they are these holier than thou saints who wants to spread equality, democracy, and equity across the world. These people are demons. That is who they are. Many of you refer to them as Democrats, and that is correct. That's who they are. They are Democrats. Now, as we bring this article to a close, meanwhile, James, in her own statement, glossed over the fact that the judgment was vacated, also playing the decision as a victory, which is weird. And here's what she had to say. The First Department today affirmed the well-supported finding of the trial court. Donald Trump, his company, and 2 of his children are liable for fraud. James said her office would appeal. And like that's the weird thing, man. And Democrats are so pathetic. So she's trying to spin this as a win. a lot of these DNC lunatics on Twitter are trying to do the same thing. And many of you guys are familiar with this goofy here. His name is Ed Krasenstein. I believe I'm saying it correctly, Krasenstein. Here's what he put. He's a DNC lunatic on Twitter. He has a pretty big following, but that doesn't mean that you're not an idiot, right? So he goes on to say, breaking, a New York appellate court has upheld the underlying fraud findings which Donald Trump, the Trump Organization, his two eldest sons, and some former executives were found liable for. The fraud Trump was held liable for was for inflating asset values to mislead lenders, insurers, and others. This was a clear violation of New York executive law. So, like I said, Democrats, they're trying to spin this as some sort of a victory. And it really just goes to show how retarded you are. You're like, why are you still hanging on to what actually lost you the election? Because this is one of the major things that won Trump the election. People seeing how crooked the mainstream media was, especially concerning how much mainstream media is in bed with the Democrat Party, with the exception of Fox News, right? It was so unbelievably unjust what was happening concerning this lawfare that week after week after week after week concerning these trials, Trump's approval rating pre-election went up every time because the American people saw that this was wrong. You guys are playing third world politics, and you're still trying to wallow in the mud of third world politics by pretending that this is appellate decision is some sort of a victory. Bro, nobody cares. This is what lost you the election. It's like how they're still silly and ridiculous running around talking about January 6th. Like, why are you still talking about that? Nobody cares, right? So they're still playing a losing game. And I don't see how Democrats really ever recover anytime soon if they're going to continue to be this stupid. But I guess they can't help themselves, you know? And what I want to do next is I want to take a moment to pivot because I want to go to CNN. And like I said, I want you guys to listen to what their senior legal analyst had to say concerning this situation here and Letitia James. And he pretty much kind of laid into Letitia James, not in a mean-spirited way, but just really acknowledging the fact that this is a huge L for Big Tush. It makes her look really bad. And it's been very obvious to everyone from the beginning that this was all just nonsensical lawfare. So I want to go into that CNN clip next.
Well, I'm not Wolf. I have been skeptical of the Attorney General's case for a long time. I'm on record saying that this is a huge win for Donald Trump any way you cut it. And this is a stinging rebuke to the Attorney General, Letitia James. The finding here, it's a very long, complicated ruling, but the bottom line is, while the finding of liability against Donald Trump can stand, for now at least, the damages award, which started at $350 million with interest, gets up close to $500 million, that is thrown out. And the core reason for that ruling, according to the judges, is essentially that there was not enough of a showing here that there were actual victims. And just to refresh people's memories, this is the civil fraud lawsuit brought by the Attorney General. The core allegation is that Donald Trump habitually overvalued his own assets when he was trying to get bank loans from banks and other lenders. And essentially, the argument that Donald Trump made below that has now had resonance in the appeals court is you're talking about very sophisticated, quote unquote, victims. These are billion-dollar banks that made the loans, got repaid on the loans by Donald Trump with interest, and actually profited to the tune of millions of dollars. So it's not the typical type of fraud case where you have somebody stealing money from other people or ripping off unknowing consumers. So this ruling by the appeals court is monumental. It was also very unusual in that it took them nearly a year to reach this decision. As Caitlin Polance just said, the next step is going to be to go up to the highest court in the state, the Court of Appeals in New York State.
Upon listening to this, when I heard it the first time around, it was just so kind of glaring to me. And I've spoken on this before concerning Big Tush's, kind of mortgage fraud allegations. I was somewhat surprised at the way in which, this was articulated here on CNN, given the fact that they bash Trump at all times, right? as much as they can, especially when you're talking about Abby Phillips on her failing show that's only being held up by Scott Jennings at this point. Scott Jennings is the only reason people watch Abby Phillips' show. You know, they trash him at all time, but when it comes to, you know, Big Tush, he just laid in on her, right? This is a horrible look. No matter how you cut, it's a massive win for Trump. Horrible look for Big Tish. And this was all nonsense from the beginning, you know, as he stated here. And all I want to say in closing is, man, don't let it go over your head that since the mortgage fraud allegations came down on Big Tush, that none of these mainstream media outlets have been coming to her defense. I don't think I've heard anybody on CNN come to Big Tush's defense one time. I believe she only had one appearance on MSNBC, and you haven't heard them. And this is MSNBC, for crying out loud. You haven't heard them talk about it. That speaks volumes to me. And it tells me, even though I know some of you, you know, don't really have faith that, you know, Big Tush is going to be held accountable, it tells me that she actually is. The fact that they've left her out to dry. Mainstream media has not given this woman any defense concerning the mortgage fraud allegation. And not only are they not giving her any defense, they're sitting up here talking about how this is a major L for her and how this makes her look bad. I feel as if they're throwing her to the wayside, if they haven't already, and saying, look, you're fighting this on your own. That's what it seems like to me. You guys let me know what you think in the comment section below. But with all that being said, that does it for today's news. So I want to thank you guys for joining me today. Please hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel. Share this video on your social media platforms. And please do not forget to follow me on Telegram at TD Media Group. The link to my Telegram is in the description box below and pinned in the comment section as well. Thank you all for your time. Until next video, peace and have a great afternoon.